Welcome. I'm your host, Stefano, and this is When Leaders Talk, a podcast about leadership, and most importantly, about leaders. Leadership is basically structure on human relationship. And this is the core of leadership itself. And this is something we've been discussing about with Julie Colbrese, or Colbrese, if you want to say it the Italian way. She is a coach. She's my coach, actually. She's a coach. She's been coaching for the last 16 years. And before that, she worked in the marketing and the creative environment. She knows a lot about leadership, also because she talks to leaders every day. And during this conversation, we went through a lot of issues that leaders face today, like the technology and AI and how this is impacting leadership and the world and the way of lead people. We talk about remote working, how hard it is to create kind of community and this team building that is essential if you want to succeed and if you want your team to be efficient and effective. We talk about how important it is to balance between an employee-centric culture and a customer-centric culture. We talk also a lot about coaching. Coaching has an important issue, an important tool that leaders can use if they want to get better in what they do, and how leaders at the end of the day understand that to be better in their job, they need to be better as a person. So a coaching relationship with a leader always is structured on topics like relationship with others, relationship with the family, relationship with the employees. It's all about relationship. This word is probably the most used word in the conversation I had with Julie. So coaching, as I said, has a kind of central role in this conversation. Also because not only because Julie is a coach herself, but because actually it is a great tool, a great development tool that you can use for yourself. Remember that to lead others, you need to understand how important it is to lead yourself first. Well, that having been said, let me remind you that if you want more information about coaching, you can visit my website, that is www.masteryourseed.com. You can also follow me on social media like LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and TikTok. All the information about my account on social media are at the end of the video. And with no further ado, Julie Colbrese. Welcome, Julie Colbrese. Welcome to When Leaders Talk.
Hello. I love that you put the Italian spin on my name.
Right? Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I don't know how to give an English name. It sounds so Italian. So
it is Italian, but somehow it got Americanized to Colbrese. But I always love when people repeat it back to me the way it was intended.
Okay, so I'm sorry for mispronounce it. Actually, thank you, because actually today is Independence Day, but we're recording on the Independence Day. So happy Independence Day.
Thank you. Thank you. It is a big day in the US.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And yet, well, actually Independence Day, there are a lot of leadership lesson learned, if you want, from those days. But we will start with my usual initial question. That is, dear Julie, do you have a definition of leadership? And if you have it, will you share it with us?
Yeah. It's my definition of leadership has definitely changed over many, many years. And I think a lot of us have default to thinking leadership is related to position or title, or often I'll have clients come to me and I'll talk about leadership coaching and they'll say, oh, I don't supervise. anyone. And through my own just sort of professional and personal development, and in particular my training through the Coactive Training Institute, I've come more to believing in and really practicing leadership in your own life, a responsibility that we have to be leaders in our own life. So it's gone from something very sort of corporate and clinical to being very personal.
Well, I guess it is. I mean, if you want to lead someone else, you need to learn how to lead yourself, right? So that's I guess the basic principle you were referring to.
Right. And a lot of the Coactive work starts with the leader within, like who are we as individuals and what responsibility do we feel, and not responsibility from a burdensome perspective, but from an opportunity, from a self-awareness and self-involvement way.
Well, let me ask you then, who are you?
Who am I? I think of myself as a champion for individuals. Like, I feel like everybody needs a champion. Everybody deserves to have a champion, someone who cares deeply about them and their success. So I do my best to go through the world trying to be that champion for people.
And I'm a witness of how you do it, and how good you are at it, because Julie is my coach. So that's, but Julie is not just my coach. She's such an expert in coaching and leadership, and that's why it's really a pleasure to have you here. Okay, so what is the thing that you noticed in the recent year, like kind of a change, if you want, when we talk about especially relationship and leadership? What is the change that you noticed in the recent years?
Mm-hmm. I think what's different now is that we're much more, I just think there's much more consciousness around taking responsibility. I hope. I think that people are becoming more aware of having, kind of having personal agency and being able to design and be intentional about how they show up in the world and how they show up in relationships. It's good news for coaches, but it's also good news for the world, I think.
Do you notice the same even with the newest generation that now are becoming leaders and starting to really be open in the workforce?
That's a good question. I think I think in some ways, yes. And in other ways, and I have such a US perspective. So one of the things that I see that I've observed differently is, it feels like we're shifting a little away from what I think is very American striving for more like, more money, more job, bigger promotion kind of stuff. And what I appreciate about the younger generation in general is it feels more like there's a sense of enough that I see there in the world that I really appreciate. A willingness to just have enough.
Right.
Satisfied and be content rather than always searching.
Right. And then I agree with you. One of the things that I noticed, for example, my generation is, it's a lot of hardworking and sacrifice and everything related to work comes first, and then the job and then everything else. And a lot of people really are focused on making money, as you said earlier. But now you're right. A lot of people are more trying to find a different balance between their job, their profession, and their personal life. I
think so. I think there's a difference between the, my generation or my parents' generation, that you worked your whole life till you turned 65. And then it was all for a little bit of enjoyment, sitting in the backyard, with a cold beer, watching TV or something. And I think young people now just don't want to, they don't believe that the prize is going to be at the end. So there's less willing to sacrifice along the way and more willing to contribute on their own terms.
Right. And you talk to leaders from both parts, I guess, you know, the young leaders and older leaders. So what happens if when those kind of different cultures and values come together?
Yeah, I think what we see is some conflict and some misunderstanding of the difference in values, but also I hope some admiration. And that there's one of the things I have found so exciting just about technology is that it did kind of level the playing field. You know, like way back when, the people that had the power were the people that could read. You know, like information was shared through the written word, through newspapers, right? You know, also storytelling, that if you could read, you had the advantage. And with technology, it sort of leveled the playing field because the young people had more knowledge. And so I'm hoping that kind of now we can appreciate what we can learn from each other.
Yeah, and now there is this artificial intelligence that really, you know, is everywhere, and
I'm just old enough. I'm just old enough to not want to learn anything new.
Well, you're right. You're right. But you know, I'm sure you heard people talking about it, and what is the idea that you have about it? Especially, how will this impact leadership and leaders? One of the things you often say that, you know, that the most important part in leadership is the relationship, right? So is AI going to really impact also the relationship, also the human dimension at some point, or just all about processes and tasks and information management and these kind of things?
Yeah, boy, I am not an expert on that in any way. I think there's in some ways, you know, somebody asked me the other day if I was worried about AI taking over coaching. And first of all, no, I'm not. I don't, you know, I think we will always want to be in relationships. So I think it's naive to think it won't change things. For sure, it will change things. But what they were saying is it can do everything except for feel. And I'm like, well, that's kind of a big thing. I mean, it's particularly a big thing in our business, but also a big thing in the world. So if it takes, you know, if it brings another element of support to people or engagement in some way that's satisfying or soothing in a way that's useful, then I think that's good. I think it's.
Well, at the end of the day, would you choose to go and talk to a human being or would you prefer to talk to a machine, even if the machine would be less fallible, if you want, compared to the human being?
You know, what's interesting though is in many ways people do prefer to talk to machines. So they would rather go to an ATM than speak to a bank teller, would rather buy a sandwich and check out through automation than have to engage with someone behind the counter. So I think it offers another place for us to choose how we want to be in relationship. Yeah.
So why do you think people in some situation prefer machines to the human?
Because you don't have to talk to them. I don't know. Why is that?
Okay, yeah, that's a good point.
More efficient, I guess. I think we have that's something that I see differently when I travel. Like there doesn't seem to be, I'm even here where I live now, the pace is very different. I live in California now compared to downtown Chicago, and going through the line at the grocery store is very different here. It feels much more like a community where people stop and talk. And so you have to, you know, some people like that, some people don't. Yeah.
Right. But still, coaching is all about talking, right? So you choose to go, you know, and talk to a coach because you want to talk, not because you want to listen to the coach. So it's more like, would you prefer to do it with a human being or with a machine? It's not like the TM where you go there and put your code and you get money. That's it. It's actually it's quite different.
I would hope that there was value in the human interaction beyond that, and maybe there's a way that it brings the concept to more people, or it's another way to access it when human connection is not possible.
Okay, yeah, that's true. Okay, so going back to
about 10 more years in this industry. I just need the human aspect just needs to happen for about 10 years for me.
Well, for me, it's a little bit longer. So
I know. Well, we're gonna have to figure this out.
yeah. Well, like everything, you need to learn how to deal with those things and how to use them and how to adapt. It's all about the adaptation. The evolution of humankind is about adapting to changes and to new features, and discovering things, and then you adapt again, and then you face challenges, and then you adapt again, right?
It does concern me as it relates to art and writing, and it just feels like there's something different, something missing, and it's maybe not noticeable to everybody, but it's noticeable to some. That human element that's behind it, that's underneath it, even if it's kind of it's not there.
Right. And actually, that's a good point. I have recently read a book that was given to me, and it was clearly written through AI. It was clearly ChatGPT talking,
Right.
and it was scary, Of course, a book like that doesn't add anything to the conversation, right? To the topic the book was about.
It's the difference between art and something else, right? Some other kind of, it's more efficient, and then it's just what do we give up for efficiency?
Right. Okay, going back to leadership. Let's try to stand it out.
I think we were still in the ballpark, right?
Yeah, we are. Okay, so what is talking again about leadership in a modern context? What is the main challenge for you today? What is the main thread, if you want, that you hear from leaders talking to you and approaching you?
It's one of the reasons why I've started talking more. When I think about coaching and leadership, I've coached for 16 years full time, and leadership is really, it's always been kind of the topic, or sort of how I've defined what I do is coaching people inside organizations to be better leaders, regardless of whether they supervise people or not, just to be better, more successful, more satisfied, and more joyful in their careers. And what I found is that it's, kind of leadership is nebulous, right? It's hard to know what that means. What does it mean to be a great leader? And so part of that is the conversation. And what I've discovered over the years is that when I ask the question, what comes back to me is I want to have better relationships with my direct reports, better relationship with my boss, better relationship with my clients. And then it extends, the people that I've worked with, the clients that I've worked with for the longest are CEOs of organizations, and they've come to coaching wanting to be better leaders of their organizations, better spouses, better parents, better community members. And that's all about relationships. So to me, it is really, we are in the relationship business. We are really relationship coaches. I don't think anyone would hire that or pay for that. So I think we need to keep it in the, it's a little bit of semantics, right? But underneath there, I think it's all about how we interact with how we show up in the world for ourselves and others.
Right. And as you say, the starting point is ourselves, the relationship with ourselves. And what is nice is that whenever you talk to those leaders, probably the first couple of sessions are very professional, and then it's all personal. It's all, as you say, in a relationship with their employees or the people, their team or clients, and so on and so forth. It's all about the human, the personal human dimension and how we interact with the others. But that's the beauty of it.
And if you think about the best leaders you've ever had, the experience of being with, or best bosses you've had, or I know in your military experience, the ones, and for me in my work experience, the ones that I learned the most from were the ones that were the most empathetic, that were good parents, that taught me a lot about parenting before I had kids. That I really could learn from how not to just be a good employee, but how to show up in the world.
Right. Yes. Unfortunately, in the military, of course there are, but there are, I guess, a minority. Well, that's because the military is built on this idea of, especially command and control leadership style, on this kind of more authoritative and more kind of some aggressive, some can be quite aggressive. So since you talk about it.
Can I ask you a question? What do you think that's changing in the military? And can it change?
I think it's going to change. I think the military is going to change, generally speaking. I know the US military are already actually developing coaching as a leadership skill. So they're teaching coaching as a leadership skill other than coaching leaders, right? And so it's part of the leadership development syllabus, if you want. And other military organizations are coming along with the US, especially, of course, the Brits and then the Australians and New Zealand, Canada, and those. My view of the Italian military is doing something now. It's changed in the last couple of years, and it's good. And it's something that I think it really lacked until now, because in my 30+ years, I never had any leadership development class or course, and never ever. And I've been in so many leading positions myself. So I learn everything observing, doing a lot of mistakes, and sometimes being successful, right?
It's interesting because I see pockets of change, for example, with like internet service or any sort of customer service by phone, and you're used to having kind of an unemotional, it's a human, I think, on the other end, but mostly unemotional. And now it's clear that they've been trained to respond with some emotion, right? So they'll say that must be very frustrating for you. And part of me, it feels so mechanical because I feel they're sort of, going to a script. But part of me is like, well, good effort. Somebody's thinking like we need to do better here.
They're faking empathy, basically, right? They try to be empathetic without really being it.
I hope it's fake it till you make it. And maybe it's like the first step to actually feeling it is to practice it. I was coming back to the US through customs in Germany. And there was a part where we got stopped and got asked questions about how our trip was, if there was places we particularly enjoyed. And I was with my son and we were both like, what was that about? It was so odd and not really part of security. It was like an additional step. And then a couple of days later, I got a survey that said, how was your experience? And so what I put together is that somewhere in that system, they thought we need to be friendly. International tourists want a friendlier experience than they're used to traveling abroad, perhaps. But what's going on to be human? There's something's happening, even if it's with TSA.
Well, if you think about it, I often get disappointed when I approach one of those people and they are clearly distant, far away. They're just, I understand they're doing their job, but they don't even try to be human, and they do everything more mechanically. But yeah, well, Yeah, I haven't experienced call centers that are empathetic yet, so I want to say that I don't like. I talk to them every time. I take the call every time. I never hang up unless it's a machine. I never hang up, and I talk to them and I explain that I'm 99% of the times I'm not interested. So I take the human, because I know they're doing their job. You know, they're there and they're paid for doing that. But I like that this new approach of being more empathetic, in a way, more, well, trying to understand on the other side who the human being. That's beautiful.
I think it's positive, right?
Yeah, it gets positive. So I was asking you something, then you stopped me. But the question I had,
it's my job to ask the question.
Well, today is my job, so. What is it, because you mentioned, you know, that like you can have a good example. So do you have a role model? Who is your role model?
Yeah, I do. You know, I feel really fortunate to have, you know, the people who have shaped who I am. I mean, you know, I kind of, as an adult, the people that have had influence on me. I mean, I was fortunate to grow up in a secure household, so I have privilege in that regard, with not having to struggle growing up. But subsequently, I've been very much influenced by one of my bosses and partners. Jay Farrell was a man that I worked with for 20 years. A dear friend of mine still, and probably the most influential person in my adult life. He was the leader of an organization. We owned an advertising and marketing agency together, and he modeled for me how to be a good leader. I'll start crying if I talk about him. I really will.
I was going to ask you, a kind of coaching question. What is that you took from him?
You know, just an absolute humility and people first. Like, before it was a thing in business, you know, he always cared deeply about the people that worked for and with him. And he really created a place that even now, and it's been, you know, the agency has been gone for probably 20 years since then. People talk about that it, you know, it was the best place they ever worked, and their relationships that were formed there are ones that they've taken through their whole life. And it was, you know, just a sense of doing the right thing and putting, you know, protecting and supporting his employees over clients, and turning down money in business if it was not right for the people, or if the people weren't being treated right. Just, you know, just that people first, in like an authentic, not, you know, I'm sure he never read a book on leadership. It was just who he was and how he showed up in the world. Yeah.
Some people are lucky to be born with the right qualities, right, and the skills, and it's not just that, and you need to be in the right moment, in the right place.
Yeah.
Right.
And, you know, the others is and you and I have both been through the Coactive Training Institute, Karen and Henry, who founded that, who I have the privilege of knowing personally, but the concepts in that and their leadership, and they will be the first to admit that they've made mistakes, and Jay as well. You know, it's not about being perfect or doing it right. And to be able to observe people who are willing to identify when they failed, and also when they may not be the right person or the right people to lead the organization, and having that self-awareness. But the concepts that they've brought forward into the world and had an impact in the world is just, I think I mean, it's the most impactful thing in my life.
It is. And I must say that I would have learned a lot of things I learned during these CTI courses before, when I was still in service. And I'm sure I would have been a much better leader, a much better person overall.
Yeah.
But that's why I became a coach, right? Just to help others now.
it out in the world, and it's just a way of being in relationship. And I think, back to what we were saying about AI, it's like the relationships and the conversations we have is an art form that can't be replicated electronically.
Right.
It's way too nuanced, I think.
It is. So you say, when you mentioned earlier the marketing agency you worked for a while, it looked like the culture that was created was very much employee centric, right? So the employee was at the core of everything. Versus now, many companies are more like customer centered, like Amazon most probably is the most famous, and if you go work for Amazon, you know that you're gonna work a lot to make your customer happy. You're gonna be less happy probably. But so how would you compare these two? Do you think there is one that is better than the other, or?
Well, I think you can have both, but it is, and it comes from a place of, it's like the leader within, taking care of yourself first, and that extends to the organization. If you treat the employees well, then when their needs are taken care of, they can be freed up to think of others, right? It's kind of that, that put your oxygen mask on first metaphor, an analogy of, if a company's not caring for the employees, it's pretty difficult to have them put their focus on customers, I think.
Right. I mean, and at the end, the employee can become sponsors of the company itself, right? I mean, they will advertise, and also you're going to retain those employees for a longer period, while most of the customer-centric organizations, they have kind of turnover quite often, a couple of years. Amazon, I think, is around 2-3 years. And that's because people get burned out, basically. Right. But anyway, I mean, working for Amazon is surely a great experience at some point, and then it's not like, I agree with you, trying to mix the two things, it's a winning solution.
Right.
Maybe.
And it's trying to figure out, I coach through an organization, a tech company, where to a person, and I've probably coached 50 or 100 people there, to a person, they love HR. They talk so well, they speak so well of HR. And I don't hear that very often.
No, that's very uncommon. Yeah, that's very uncommon.
Unfortunately, the HR is often at odds with the rest of the organization, and so it makes me really curious about what's different. What are they doing different? And part of it is they're structured so they have their HR people have a small book of business, a small number of individuals that they support. So they're able to very proactively know those individual employees, and they're in relationship with those employees, not just when something's wrong or there's a problem or they're being put on a performance plan. They're actually more engaged in their satisfaction and in helping them navigate and find the right place within the organization.
That's great. I mean, you get to know people for real, not just, as you say, when they have problems, but right. Who they are, who they're coming from, what's the story, and that's beautiful. That's when you create really a kind of bond in a team, right? Because
and it's authentic relationship. It's not it's not checking a box,
right?
For an annual review or a quarterly check-in or whatever. They're engaged. They're part of that team. They're able, they have resources to support and to help individuals navigate that.
Well, there are companies that were pretty much kind of icebreaker on this side. I think one beautiful book that I read was about Netflix. Netflix was one of the first companies who actually when they were still renting DVDs, or actually thinking about renting DVDs. They were still not a real company yet. They did create a culture that was really based on the employee, and all the needs of the employee were taken care of. They had the freedom of dealing with their things without feeling guilty, if they had to miss a day of work and everything else. And I think other tech companies, they are following this example. Even Google probably is the greatest. Despite it's a big, huge company, they still are known to have this culture that is centered on the employee.
Mm-hmm. It's one of the questions when I don't really do career transition coaching anymore, but when I was doing a lot of it, one of the things I encouraged people to ask on interviews is to find out if the CEO has a coach. Because my perspective is if the CEO is willing to hire a coach, if they're willing to say, I may be, I built a successful business, but I'm always learning, or I want to get better, I want to be a better leader, to me, that's a good sign. And if they offer coaching inside the organization, that says that they're interested in developing people, and, that they have that mindset of growth and development. By the way, Netflix is looking for a full-time coach.
Here you go. You should go.
I can't because, I'm using somebody else's password. I'd probably get kicked out.
It's not true.
That would be the first question on the interview. Do you have your own password, or
what's your account? And who you share your account with?
Exactly.
They're enforcing now the new regulation.
I know. Yeah. No one likes them being the bad guys, but they are looking for a coach.
Okay. Well, and so you say something interesting, and of course you're advocating coaching a lot, and I'm with you. There is an aspect that I think is really important, and that's the will to grow, right? It's this kind of journey that never ends, especially if you're a leader. You will never be always the perfect leader, or you will never be the perfect leader ever, actually. But it's not like you will never reach a destination. Have you ever met people who thought actually they were the best they could be, and they were happy, and they were like, I'm good?
Well, I do. I mean, absolutely. I know people who are not, who are not learners, sort of organically, or not interested in professional development. I don't know that I have. Do I have a judgment about that? I don't know. I think in some ways I can admire people who are content with where they are.
Okay, I pause a second because I was thinking, okay, would I be content? As a person, probably yes. You meet this person, but if you work with this person, would you be happy if your boss has reached the conclusion that they have at the peak of their learning curve or whatever, and they're good with it? I don't know. Honestly, I don't know.
That would be very difficult for me. I mean, I certainly know people who think they know everything, and they're not very pleasant to be around, right?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, there are a lot of people actually say, "Oh, I'm always right."
Yeah, or they
like to say
job, or they're the leader of an organization, and that's where I hear a lot of just kind of stagnation, where they're doing the same thing over and over again, and it's leading to not lose instead of leading to win.
I love this. I like this, and then it comes along with the lack of willing to grow, because at the end of the day, you keep saying, well, we always done like this, it works, and that's it. Well, talking about this, since I've coached a lot of leaders, which is the main failure, the main, I don't know, how can I call it? Yeah, well, let's call it failure. The main weakness, here you go. The main weakness or blind spot that you have noticed in these people.
I think it's a great question. I did, you know, up until a couple of years ago, and even still, I coach several CEOs, and I've coached hundreds of CEOs of organizations, of US-based companies of various sizes. And the people who were most difficult to be in relationship with were the ones who thought they knew everything, who lacked the self-awareness, which means they didn't stay with coaching very long. You know, I actually went back to school and got a master's degree in psychology to better understand that narcissism in leadership. And you know, there was a time in my career where I thought, am I attracting this? Because there are a lot of really, and I'm not qualified to diagnose narcissism, but we all know people who are very self-absorbed, right? And so there was a time where I'm like, am I attracting this? Because there is a lot of this. And the research I did said that there was one study, and this is going back several years now, although I doubt the numbers have improved, but that 1 in 5 CEOs in the US were diagnosed as narcissists. Oh. And the thing about it is that they're, you know, it's self-reporting in some ways, because mostly people who know everything don't mind telling everyone that they're the best. So my experience was that they were the most difficult to work with. Also fascinating to me to be in relation to personality. You know, sometimes you could find your way in with a part of that that's a protective quality.
How do you do that? How can you do that?
You know what? It's staying. It's being willing to stay. And it's different for me. It's different, you know, as a coach. They don't hold power over me like an employee or a spouse or a child in a way that would be difficult to be in relationship with. It was more, you know, and I have a lot of heart for difficult people. I really do. I think often misunderstood, not always. Sometimes they are what they see, but, you know, they are what they seem. But I do have a lot of kind of empathy for that.
I think that narcissistic leaders are, the most difficult to deal with, especially if you work with them or for them. And that's my experience, of course. Because, as you say, you know, they're always right, but it also means that whatever you say has to be in agreement with them. Otherwise, you're wrong. And that's so they are mainly surrounded of yes man or yes woman, basically, and that's it. You know, there is no fun, there is no creativity other than theirs, and the organization might be shaped around them. So the moment they leave, if they leave, it's like a house of cards and everything collapses.
Well, and also they tend to run through people and have difficult relationships, and you see that generally in all aspects of their life. I remember a man that I coached for a number of years, and he was the CEO of an organization, and we used to meet for dinner, which is not unusual sometimes in the sense that that's when they have time available. And he always had me pick the restaurant. And he said that I make decisions all day long. You pick the restaurant. Like I can't make another decision. I don't know, I might have worked with him for 5 or 6 years. And then one day he said, you know what, it occurs to me that you also own your own business and you make decisions all day long. And it might be nice for you if I pick the restaurant. And I thought, my work is done here. Forever. But, you know, I'm being a little bit facetious about it. He did have a good laugh about it. I mean, he wasn't lacking in self-awareness in some ways. But truly, it was like it never clicked in him, you know, like his he was never thinking about me. And part of that is the coaching relationship. So that's why we can have a little fun with it. But also it was indicative of how he shows up in the world.
Right, because in a coaching relationship, is the coach asking question to the client, the coachee, right? It's all about them, basically. It's all about their problems. It's all about their perspective and everything else.
And I'm not a machine. I am a human on the other side. So there is, the coaching relationship does need to work for both. It wasn't a big deal, but it was just an interesting kind of moment of self-awareness.
I don't know if you want to talk about this. So let me ask you this question. As a coach, have you ever felt you failed a client?
Oh, I definitely know that there's clients that I haven't done my best work with. And I know there's clients that I had to resign. I've resigned clients where I thought I couldn't do my best work. And, sometimes that at the beginning, or I do. It's like we do a chemistry check or a information call, and you just get a sense that I'm not the right coach. But then other times, definitely there have been relationships where I felt that I can't, like we talk about in our coaches training, holding this person naturally creative, resourceful, and whole is the language that we use. And me feeling like I'm not holding them that way anymore. I'm feeling biased, or I noticed I'm agitated, or something else that means I'm not doing my best work.
Yeah, or maybe when the coaching session approaches, you feel like, oh, right? I have to do this.
Well, and we say that you need to fall in love with your clients, and in some ways that is the relationship too, is that you have to be able to want for that person, long for that person, and put your attention over there. And if it's creating something in you that is getting in the way of that, it's probably not a good relationship.
Right, you cannot fix it. At the end, there is once again, we're talking about human relationships. So it's, if you don't have the kind of feeling, mutual feeling, that if there is no click, there is no click. I mean, that's it. And you have to recognize it so they can move on and look for another coach if they need a coach, and you're not stuck with a person you don't want to talk to, basically.
Yeah. There's Elizabeth Gilbert who wrote Eat, Pray, Love. She's an American author, and she's pretty well known for that. They made a movie out of it with Julia Roberts, but she's written like 15 books. And I just watched a YouTube video that she did, and it's not new, and I've watched it before, but I shared it with someone. And she talks about the difference between a career, a job, a hobby, and a vocation. And it resonates with me and so many of my clients in the way that specific to leadership, if you're going to have a career, and you don't have to have a career, you can have a job, lots of people just have jobs, and that's okay. Her definition is a job is just an exchange, it's transactional. It's a day's work for a day's pay. And if you're going to have a career, you have to love it because it asks a lot of you. And I think that's where the leadership comes in. If you're going to choose to be in a career that demands that you're in relationship with people, that you're showing up for other people, you should love it because it's going to ask a lot of you.
Yes. I mean, if you have problems dealing with people, if you don't like talking to people at all, right, and you don't want to force yourself in doing it, I'm sure that it's hard to lead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Do you think on this side that remote working is helping or is making things more complicated?
Know the answer to that. I think I hear a lot on both sides how how much better it is for people, how much more convenient it is. It gets back to values, in terms of, it feels like there's some efficiencies, and I think as a culture, maybe US based, maybe broader, we value efficiency. And so you hear from some people, there's nothing like being able to do a meeting remotely and not have to travel and fly and all that. Do we give up something in that human connection?
Right,
Probably.
that's the question. Do we give up something?
Yeah, probably. I think there's something with that, sort of breathing the same air, and some of the subtleties that you miss in being relationships.
I think it adds a layer of complexity when we talk about teamwork.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I work from home, even during the coffee break, I'm gonna get up, take a coffee, and come back, and then I'm done. I'm not gonna talk to you. I'm not going to try to socialize with you that you are doing your same coffee break. That's the first thing, and then it lacks. I mean, it's hard to find a way for a team to work kind of in synergy, because it's harder to communicate frequently, because everyone is away. I'm coming from ships where really you scream from one part of the ship, and the other person on the other side can hear you pretty much. I mean,
you're really in relationship, like 24/7.
Right, yeah. So it's everyone can see you every moment, basically, and almost every moment. And there's always a continuous chat, and then it's such a you can create, doesn't happen always, but you can create such a deep human connection. It's really a brotherhood or a sisterhood or any kind of strong community, and a sense of the community. It can be exceptional. Like I'm in touch with a group of people I worked with 10 years ago, and we talk quite often. And it's all about small things. We don't talk about work, or we might talk about work, or we celebrate promotions and new jobs and these kind of things. But it's beautiful that we are still together. I think that's a great achievement.
You have that foundation. And say that can be created in any organization, though, right? I think it's important that people get away and learn to know each other personally, that they have, because what you're talking about is that shared experience. It's like going to summer camp. My kids went to summer camp 15, 20 years ago, and those are still some of the relationships that they hold today, because you've had that, padding out in the morning in a cup of coffee in your pajamas, or, a million small conversations that you have between doing whatever it is you're brought together to do, that can't be replicated on Zoom or remotely.
No, but I think there is a challenge. I'm not saying it's impossible. It's, as I said earlier, it's more complex, but it's not impossible. So leaders need to find a different way to create this kind of bond, to recreate the same community feeling that was easier when everyone was sharing the same space.
Yeah. There's one company that I mentioned earlier that has the fantastic HR department. It's completely remote. It's global. There's people all over the world, and every team meets twice a year. They can meet up anywhere in the world. So if you think about an organization, whatever they might have previously have spent on office space, instead they're investing in travel and these group meetups, which are critical to them getting to know each other. And I hear this again and again from the people that I coach there. That's, our team is working so much better since we got to see people in person. We got to share food with them. that's how we connect, right? Over food, over sharing our lives and experiences. And the content is sort of beside the point. They do, I think they have some business that they take care of, but mostly it's that sharing meals, going for walks together, experiencing a museum together, that sort of thing. And without exception, they come back saying, oh, it's so much better now that we got to know each other.
Yeah, I don't think you can extrapolate teamwork from
right. Try that, computer. Try that.
Absolutely. All right, we're almost at the end of this conversation, and actually time was passing too quick. And I have time for the last question. That is, what is the suggestion you will give to a person that comes to you and say, hey, Julie, I really want to be a great leader? What would you tell to this person?
I would say focus on the relationship. Put your attention on that other person. There's an exercise I do with leaders where I have them give an acknowledgement to someone, and I line them up and they're across from someone, and they always squirm and say, well, I don't know this person. I don't really work with this person or whatever. And my belief is everything you need to know is right over there in that beautiful human being that you are now in relationship with, and to just connect on that level. It's all about the relationship, baby.
It's all about the relationship. And I think we remember this for this conversation. It's really been about relationship and coaching, a lot of coaching. And well, thank you, Julie, for having been with us. It's been a pleasure sharing this hour with you, and especially your experience in coaching and the importance of coaching in leadership development is great.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be in relationship with you. I appreciate it. I've learned from you well, and I'm so I'm so interested and admire so much your military experience and the way that you're bringing it to the rest of the world. It's much needed.
Thank you.
My pleasure.